so they will not be as efficient as hers are normally. But we'll go ahead and get started. And I guess we'll start with a quick roll call. Mark is not here. Rajiv is present. Pat is here. Phyllis, myself, Billy, Frank, and then the other three, King, Rebecca, and Wendy. King usually would be late because he's usually coming from class, but like I say, he did send that and say that he would not be here. So the next thing would normally be the acceptance of the agenda. The agenda was provided out. Hopefully you got an email of it. If you didn't, I printed a couple of copies of it. So if you guys want to see that, not anything huge or earth-shattering, but we need a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion. Second.
I didn't ask for a second yet. Pat and Frank, thank you, sir. Any discussion on the agenda? If not, I'm just going to do a quick roll call or just a quick vote, voice vote of that. All in favor of accepting the agenda, signify by saying yay or
yay.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Next thing would be motion passed. Next thing would be the approval of the minutes. We were talking about the minutes were distributed, but if anybody wants a copy, I brought in a couple of copies of them. I don't think there were any comments. That was just the agenda. Here's the minutes. Oh. I'm not supposed to lick my fingers, right? We learned that through COVID. Well, that's weird. For some reason I managed to do it.
Thank you.
She has the minutes out there.
Oh, I see what it is. There's two signature pages.
Okay, let me just pull it up.
See, you mailed.
Because you got your notes on that. I'll pull it up.
Oh, here, I got more copies. Grab a copy out of that. I think there's 3 copies that I printed off. So, I know Mark and I both had responded. I think who else had responded that they had read them, but are there any corrections to the minutes? We have to have a motion to accept the minutes.
Motion to accept the minutes. Second.
Thank you, Frank and Pat. All in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Any opposed? Public comments. Jocelyn, you're the only member of the public here tonight.
I know. No comment tonight. You can breathe a sigh of relief.
Nope.
We need to play.
You know what?
What's that?
If I stuck to the agenda and not looked at the minutes, we would have done that. So, the invocation. Frank, would you be willing to offer us an invocation for tonight? Stand for that, and then for the pledge and the flag, we'll just begin the pledge, and the flag is out there in front of the library.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all that has transpired during the day. We thank you for health and strength. We thank you for our families. We thank you for going for our city, and we thank you for those who are protected and served for the citizens of this city. So, Lord, we ask all blessings in the strong name and the precious name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. We do pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Rajiv, thank you for that. Calling me on that. I got started going down through here and looking at them. So we've done the next 3 public comments. Pat, anything from your district or in
Not a
general
thing.
to talk about?
Not a thing.
Phyllis?
Nothing.
I will say the same thing. There's nothing significant to report. Frank
Nothing significant.
and Rajiv.
No, nothing to report this month.
For the old business, it was, so what I will say is, it says in here, the committee officers informed the committee about their meeting. So we had a meeting with Chief Gandy a couple of weeks ago, kind of talking about in general some things that are going on, kind of trying to gauge where we're at as a committee and how we proceed forward. So a couple of things that came out of that, I think, Chief, one of those is some awards that he is starting to institute within the department. One of them was, it was kind of interesting, I guess I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag if you haven't heard it. But, one of them had to do with, I wanna call it like a citizenship, but it was like an officer serving in the community. So, doing something that goes above and beyond. And the one example that we were kind of talking about, potentially we know that there are instances where officers, and I don't know if this was something that happened in Madison or something in his previous department that he was talking specifically about. It was like someone who'd been called for like a health and safety check, and the officer went, found the person was alive, but was suffering with some really severe issues that basically if somebody had not shown up, that person may not have made it. And in fact, what this officer ended up doing was like returning to the home and cooking some meals during the week for that person. Something that you think going above and beyond just being a police officer, that's, they're not all out there to write tickets or make arrests or something, but some way that they serve the committee or serve the community that was just, would be good. And I guess one of the thoughts that we had about it, and Chief was leaning this way anyway, was not being something that, okay, you're the quarterly officer, where you kind of go, okay, who are we going to get? Well, we haven't given it to Brian yet this year. Let's give it to, but it would be something that would be rewarded when it was warranted. So we talked a little bit about that and just different ways that officers are recognized. Because it just is as important as when we see something done wrong, we want to call that out. When we see something done right, we want to recognize those things as well. So that was one of the areas that we had talked about. The other was about our communications. Pat, there's been a struggle sometimes getting the announcements for the meeting out in what we think would be a good timely manner. So that was, Chief is aware of that and he feels that as well. As a matter of fact, there was a topic we talked about for tonight, but just with everything going on in the November, December timeframe, we kind of asked him, let's push that off until after the new year, because that's a pretty significant topic, mental health, that we think we really want to make sure we push the envelope on communication for that, to get that out. So that was another thing that Chief had talked about. We kind of rambled through several other topics just real quickly, but some of it had to do with, Pat, I know you've had some comments about just different ways that the committee is formed or functions and stuff, and we talked through some of that as far as like, hey, if we were going to do anything, what are the right ways that we have to do it, Brian? And you kind of came in and you helped us redo the first iteration of our charter. But basically, we set the ground rules for our operating within the meeting, but the parameters through which we operate were set by city council. So the way that the committee was established, the membership of the committee, all that was kind of designated by city council. So for us to substantially change it to match something that someone else like Huntsville or Mobile and others who have, some of them have very similar forms, some of them have some differences. Pat, you called out some of those differences. Some of that we would need to put together, maybe work with Brian or something, because a lot of that would have to go back to city council as far as how we're structured or how, you know, the parameters that we operate within. I'll leave the rest. There was a couple other things that we talked about. I'll leave those for Mark to talk about later. Those were the biggest things. One is how do we get better messaging? Chief believes that there's a lady who, it's not Samantha, but there was someone who was coming through doing, I'm going to call it a zero-based review, but she was meeting with all the department heads about stuff like communications. Do you remember her name?
I'm not sure. I think our HR director may have spearheaded something like that.
I think it was Megan that put it
Maybe.
together, yeah. But it wasn't Megan, it was somebody else who kind of does consulting or something in that form. But anyway, some stuff like that. But that had a lot to do with the other thing that we did talk about a little bit, but it's not yet time. But just to be aware that, you know, we'll need to look and see when we need to do elections. I think there's some feeling that we did them a little early this year. I think we did them April or.
Well, as far, you can basically have a reorganization anytime that you want.
Right, okay.
So I would say that you're really set to have like a certain time. I would have to go look at your bylaws again to confirm.
I think we said a year, but I think we just generally set it as a year.
So I think that basically, if there's something in your bylaws that say from this date, but you can have a reorganizational meeting, if
At
someone
any time.
resigns or whatever, you can, vote new president, new pro tem, et cetera. Yeah, we can take a look at that to see what y'all think would work, and I'll check with the bylaws to confirm.
And what would the vote be for?
That voting strictly would be electing officers, and according to our current charter, the three positions are chair, vice chair, and secretary, which respectively are Mark, myself, and Rebecca. I think at one time we talked about a treasurer. We don't have any funding, so it was like, there's no reason to have that. If there was some reason to have the other thing that our bylaws allow us, I'm going to confuse. Charter is what the city council said. I think our bylaws are what
I'm sorry, of course, your bylaws are yours, the charter itself. So
Yeah.
I don't remember the charter saying when you have to.
I don't think it did, I think that was strictly set within our bylaws. But the other thing is it allowed for the formation of any committees if we saw fit, like any subcommittees. And so far I guess as far as a committee goes, maybe we've done them around like the parade or something like that. Obviously, I don't believe we are participating in the Christmas parade. That was the last thing. I do want to encourage people, if you have some time, the Christmas trees are out. They're being decorated. I think Friday is the official lighting of the tinsel trail. And there are a ton of trees out there right now. It's like, wow, I think for the Historic Society, this is our 4th or 5th year of doing this, and it's gotten bigger every year.
And I was going to say, Renee Bartlett mentioned at council that apparently there's some sort of notation that our Christmas trees are one of the most Instagrammable, if that's even a word, locations in North Alabama. I don't know where that designation came from, but she announced to the council that somebody basically determined that it's someplace that a lot of people are taking pictures apparently because it's a legal backdrop with all the trees.
It's neat. I mean, I will say this. So I do the email for the Historic Society, and every year I get 4 or 5 people that are like, hey, how do we, and they start in like June. How do I get a Christmas tree? So Debbie Overcash has managed that for the Historic Society, and it's been neat. There are a lot of activities that go on downtown. If you get a chance, take a look at the city website, Historic Society website. I think I have it updated with all of those. But the Tinsel Trail is one of the big things. The Christmas Capers is something else that goes on. That's kind of fun if you've never caught a rubber chicken off the top of a building, something purely Madison, I'll say, kind of neat. But if you know the history of that event, it's really kind of funny. I heard one year a chicken flew all the way from the top of that building to Front Street. It's like, interesting. But there are a lot of activities that will be going on downtown at this time of the year. So if you get a chance to participate or anything, do that. I do not believe there's any other old business, unless someone has anything.
Well, just to put in my 5 cents worth, the reason I sent out copies of the organizing paperwork from several other towns is, and this is me speaking, what do we really truly do? We're here to take comments from the public, but in reality that rarely if ever happens. We put on some phenomenal presentations that we see, but nobody else sees. And, you know, I'm just trying to think, what can we as an organization do to further provide support to the PD? That's what we're here for. And right now, in my opinion, we're not doing that.
And I'll say, Pat, I feel what you're saying as well to some degree. I mean, it's like, and Jocelyn, you've been around since about the time our committee formed. Frank, you and Rajiv have both been on. You know, we started out, I think there was a good basis of attendance. So there was, you know, the information that was presented was getting out to a small group. But that energy has waned to some degree. I mean, the last time when we did the presentation on traffic stops, that was probably, well, that was our highest citizen attendance, not counting when the Boy Scouts came in when we did the bigger meeting.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was probably the best attended. Jocelyn, I know something that I think yourself and others, the I Vote Madison group, of how do we, you know, getting them broadcast, would that do something? What I'm interested in even is, I guess, like tonight you're recording. I think if we were to do, I assume you're recording, there's a camera with a red light, but, you know, I'll even go so far as to say, I don't know how many people have an appetite to sit and watch a 35 or 45-minute meeting, but there are times that we could break sections out, especially I think when like the SROs or anyone from the department is presenting current things. You know, some of those topics are like last month it was Asher Quran. Some of those, if we could break those down into digestible chunks. I mean, I have an appetite. I watch a lot of woodworking videos and other videos where I go, I can watch anywhere from 6 to 13 minutes before I lose interest. You know, after that, I kind of doze out of it or zone out of it or quit listening, you know, start doing something else. But I thought about how do we take, and I think Chief was amenable to this, and Mark and Rebecca when we were all talking, how do we take some of this and package it a little bit and make it a digestible chunk that we could put, I'm going to say is like a YouTube video that would be 7 minutes on a traffic stop, you know, 8 minutes on mental health. And maybe you take one presentation and break it into 2 or 3 of those, and people might start looking. You know, that would drive external engagement. Obviously, unless they comment on videos or something, that's not going to happen. There has been a little bit, and I think you and I had a brief exchange on Facebook talking about some stuff about that specific topic was policemen serving at public places. And I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. Like police officers who are working at a school, or not a school, but like a church, or movie theaters, or, you know, serving generally in a, you know, people see them, and as an officer, I mean, they're wearing their uniform, they may have their issued gear, and some people are like, well, why is that police officer at the theater? Is there a problem at the theater? And it's like, no, there's a whole way that they can do that as I'm gonna call it a second job, you know, that the Ethics Commission of Alabama has ruled, said, yeah, it's an appropriate thing. One is you wouldn't want him to be there in another car, in his own car, and then something happened and he gets called into work, so he's gotta go home, get his police car, you know, get his city car and come. So this, you know, Alabama Ethics has said, hey, that's a proper use. It's, you know, but I think the employment has to be agreed to by the department, right? It's like, you know, you're not going to be working for some disreputable, you know, organization doing that. The city's going to have to go, yeah, that's something we agree with putting one of our officers off duty at.
And having worked for the city of Birmingham, there are, when you say disreputable, there are places where we would encourage in the city of Birmingham officers to go and moonlight, because it was precisely a bad place.
Right.
That they wanted to have some sort of a police presence, even if it was so.
But that is
they
still
encourage
serving a
people
mission.
to work at some very bad bars, so that they could.
Right.
You know, and it's a win-win situation sometimes when you know if an officer's being paid and it's being approved by the city,
Yep.
then you know, it maintains order, or you know, the city wants to do so. So that's something. Hopefully, well, Birmingham, of course, is a different creature than Madison, but it does serve a purpose to put officers even in bad places, allowing them to moonlight there.
Yeah, and I guess, fair comment, I guess I was thinking more like you wouldn't want him being the guy holding the bag, you know, the money bag, you know, or something, doing something that you go, why is a cop doing that? But, you know, it is an interesting thing, and I mean, we'd all love to say we pay our officers enough that that's not something they would, you know, hey, well, I'm making more than that. We all know there's no public servant who probably feels that they make more than enough money. You know, as a former government employee, I never felt that. Hey, if I can make money, you know, when they offered us overtime, I took every opportunity. But anyway, but that was, you know, those are good interactions, but how do we drive more? I guess, and Pat, I think you're picking at some right things there.
Well, another example, you know, I went through, like I said, I went to probably a dozen cities in the immediate area.
Mm-hmm.
And the two that jumped out at me were Virginia Beach and Huntsville. And one of the things that they have included in their committee is a function of a citizen review board. And the way that it is essentially implemented, if something goes to internal affairs for review, investigation, and there's still some controversy about the results, then it's referred to the committee as a non-sworn officer, almost oversight to give, you know, further input into the process. And I know it was used pretty rigorously after the riots downtown Huntsville. You know, that was a mess.
Actually, and the interesting thing, because our committee formed right when that report was being turned in. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was very interesting the way they did that. But they actually, the interesting thing in that is the Huntsville committee actually contracted out a company from Birmingham. It was a law firm in Birmingham, or a public relations firm in Birmingham, that actually is the one that conducted that investigation, or that review, I'll say. I thought it was very interesting. I mean, reading the review, if you didn't get a chance to read it, I'll dig that up. It was made available through AL.com probably. Mm-hmm. It was very interesting to read, and they had a lot of good information in there. But I thought it was interesting in that case that they actually paid to have that report done, but at the same time, I would argue that at least in my case, I work a job that is all that, you know, I don't know that I would have the time to dedicate to doing an investigation, nor the background and expertise in it. So the group they got was actually dedicated to doing things like that, not all, but it was a pretty comprehensive report. Did you read, I mean, it was
Yeah.
50, 60 pages if I
And
remember.
of course, the Huntsville incident was, monstrous.
Yes.
Many players. I would anticipate if we were to have a similar problem that internal affairs would like an additional input, it's not going to be like that. It's not
Yeah,
a
that
case
was,
without-
that definitely was its own
Yeah.
beast
Right.
in that, because actually, if you read the report, it talked about, it was not only Huntsville, I think Madison had officers who were
Yes.
there. Aaliyah is the one who rolled in and actually shut things down at the very end. There were like 4 or 5, Huntsville, or Madison County Sheriff's Department was involved. So there were a lot of jurisdictions that were all coming together that were very interesting. But,
And there are those among our citizens that no matter what you say, they don't trust the city, they don't trust the police department. And
Well-
having the option of having some level of civilian review pertaining to a contentious issue, I think has validity.
Well, we basically, when you look at the situation in Decatur, where you can have a non-biased group to go in and do some investigating or look into it, however what you have to do. I think with this committee, this would be something, and even if they had to bring in an outside group of people to actually investigate, I think it would bring a cohesiveness among the people in the police department. But we don't have that type of, we're not set up for that.
right.
So, but I think that's some of the things that we're talking about, and what Friel is talking about is that what are we really doing?
Right.
Other than we come here and we talk and we see films, about SROs and mental health, but there's nothing that we're doing to really support the public.
Or the PD.
Well, I'm
Or the
new kid on the
PD.
block, I got a question. I know we have the brochure and pamphlet that says who everyone is, and it's out on the web. 9 out of 10 people haven't paid much attention to either. So what has been done so people in each district know who we are, other than those 2 things?
That's it.
That's a good question.
Because I was thinking, I think it's called Next Door.
Yep.
Maybe we should put it in there, what we do, what this organization is about. And that way we might find out more information. Because I don't think many people really know, they know that it exists, but do they really know it exists and what the purpose is? So maybe we need to introduce ourselves on Next Door.
Well, we already do that.
Well,
No, not everybody is, not everybody knows
not
that.
everybody. I would, well,
Yeah.
and I would even argue, not argue, but say, not everybody on our side, from us, even participates in Next Door, like I don't. I do know Rebecca has posted in the past.
And I post every time we have a function.
Right, so I mean, since
Well-
I'm not on it, I
Well, then
I
on
can't.
another, you know,
But
maybe
there's
we could
probably
look
more engagement that could happen.
and see what subdivisions are in our district, and then send a letter to the HOA.
That
And
is
let them
something,
know.
yeah. Chief brought that one up specifically because a difference in how they functioned in Virginia Beach is they had a large enough police department that they had precincts or districts, like I think maybe they call them precincts. But you had, each precinct had its own committee, and then like once every so many months or something, you had all of the precincts to get together and have like a total department-wide. We don't have that kind of size where we have anything like that. But what he said is, I can't remember the term that they had. I don't want to call them wards or something, but it was basically, I was almost there and it won't come in. But he was like, you would go to those people, and those were the people who represented the communities. And that's what we were trying to walk through and say, maybe that's the HOAs. So maybe we reach out to the HOAs and say, and we even talked when we first formed, Frank, about maybe we take some meetings and we go to Cliffs Cove or, you know, and do a full meeting there.
But everybody wouldn't have to be on Nextdoor to do a posting, but we could use it and put the email addresses that we have on the website out there, and you'd be surprised how people might talk among themselves. They may not be on Nextdoor, but they may talk to another neighbor or something like that.
No, I agree. I mean,
and if that's a possibility, I don't have a problem with getting a digital copy and putting it out there.
Okay, because I know Rebecca does some. Sarah, when she was on the committee, I think they were doing some. But, you know, me, I kind of put my toes in Nextdoor and just kind of, I have enough things going on, so I kind of
have most of it going to like my family email, and if something piques my interest, then I might go in it, or if it's something I want to get rid of, and I say, hey, for free, or something like that.
Yeah.
But still, there's a lot of eyes out there on it, and you know, it may not be your particular eyes, but it might be someone that's in your district that might be interested. It might have some information that we need to know.
Good point.
Well, before each presentation, Rebecca normally puts out a flyer, and then I go in and onto the larger Nextdoor, and then the Nextdoor particularly for my area, and put that poster online.
So you can go up.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I dealt with it in my little neighborhood, so I wasn't sure. And I talked to her.
You have the choice of how far you want.
Of how far you want to go? Okay. But yeah, I mean, that's probably something, you know, I'll definitely make sure to bring that up with Mark.
But we've been doing that, it hasn't really resulted
Right.
in an increased audience.
And I think that's where we were just trying to say, if we had some other fresh ideas. Like my only idea was, hey, if we did something in bite-sized chunks, just to kind of, you know, some people get interested and they'll go, oh, I didn't know they talked about that kind of stuff. So maybe they'll come out. Jocelyn, you were going to say something?
Well, if you'd like a citizen's perspective, I mean, to me, this is how I got involved. And in my opinion, this community with so many people coming from so many different places, we have to get back to grassroots, meeting people one-on-one, talking to each other. And it's not just this committee. In my opinion, it's also our council members. They need to show up at these HOAs. They need to have town halls, a back and forth where we can talk to each other, where we can regain trust. None of us know each other in this community. Now you've got the people who have lived here forever and they say they're from here, whatever. But when they have new people come in, it's like, well, you're not from here. Well, then it just what is it? It's separating people. It's not making our community come together. And so, like I said, just putting a face. I've told people, you know, if you have an issue, you can go to either of you directly. First of all, they have to trust you, right? Yep. But they also have to know your face, your number, your email, and know that then once they do reach out to you, that you're going to get an email back or a response. Because what happens with even our council members, or if we send an email out, like we don't even get an email back that says received. But there I spent a whole day on an email, you know, getting the words just right, trying to get my, you know, my grievances out there. And now they've got more people showing up, but it's the same people because they feel like their, you know, grievances haven't been addressed. So I see where we're going to just keep having the same problems over and over if we don't find a way to get back, in my opinion, to grassroots. So everything you've said is valid. People love timestamps on our I Vote Madison videos, but we have to have volunteers to put them on there. I mean, and what is important to one person is not important to the next person. So it would be great to have several volunteers putting timestamps on what's important to them. And so polls are very popular. I mean, I did see Jeff North put a poll on Nextdoor. I mean, anything where, and all someone has to do is check a box, yes, no, or choose what's important to them. I mean, if you guys could do some polls, I think that gets everyone knowing you're still here. So that's just something off the top of my mind.
Something that several of our previous chiefs did, and you know about this, they do basically a breakfast with the chief at that fast food restaurant right across
over
from the
Jack's.
PD.
I remember the previous.
And we used to get a pretty good turnout from that.
We still do occasions. Coffee with the cop.
Yeah. I haven't seen it advertised.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I think that's Rebecca's kind of push of why she wants us to try to participate in things like the street festival and the parades and stuff like that. It is to put a face with a name. It is purely so somebody goes, hey, I saw you. And, I mean, Rajiv and I sat at the tent for quite a while. Amazing how people come up and talk. And the one thing I'll always say about that is how peaceful it is. I mean, you'll get one or two people that'll come up and maybe say something remotely negative. Most people are like, wow, you guys are out here. This is cool.
We met a lot of people.
Yeah.
Told them about us. A lot of people have got the knowledge about what we are, what we do. We gave out cards and
The pamphlets.
maybe it's a good thing they don't have issues. I don't know.
I know that's where we kind of keep going. It's like, okay, are people not coming because there's not a big issue to coalesce around, or is it that they feel like we're just not being effective?
I mean, I had people call me. I mean, it's not been very often. Right. But people have called me and said, "Hey, here's an issue," or it's just not. I do like the HOA idea. I think because this time of the year, everybody has their annual meetings. I know a couple of our neighborhoods have it next week, and there's another one. So that would be a good way to reach out through their emails or in person. I don't know how many, probably hundreds of subdivisions.
Yeah, I mean,
Some we probably don't have names of yet.
I'll just say my issue with emails is they're red and dead. Unless people put, it's almost like you have to touch them, right?
I mean,
just because we get too many emails.
Yeah. Or go personally to these meetings. That's going to be a lot of legwork to go physically. I can do it in my neighborhood in a couple,
Right.
but beyond that,
Anything else? I think one, increasing next door, maybe coming up. Maybe the problem, Pat, for me in thinking of next door is maybe we just haven't put together a strategy. We're doing something, but it's what we're doing aimed at producing a result. Maybe that's something, we can talk to Rebecca about.
Well, historically, when I put it up on Nextdoor, then I go back into it 3 or 4 days later. Maybe 2 or 3 people will bother to read it.
But that's social media.
It is. I have a love-hate relationship with all social media, mostly hate. You want to see my feed? It's mostly right now bears and woodworking. Rescue dogs. So,
But I do know there's an appetite for an oversight as well, because I spoke to it. I know Hanu spoke to it when this was being formed. So I do know that would be something that people would be interested in.
And without going too far, I'll say that there were some topics when we were talking with Chief, and I'll kind of leave it to Mark and Chief to go into more. Chief had a different perspective, and I'll just, I thought he would be a little bit more closed vest, and I found it very refreshing that he did not come across that way in that meeting. I mean, I thought that was a very safe place for him to go, well, you know, I've got concerns about this. But I think he truly, you know, comes from an environment that they were, you know, a little different, but he was far more open to some suggestions like that than what I might have thought. You know, we're the paid professionals, and we'll run this job, you know. He seemed truly interested in how do we reach out, so.
Well, did you
And just
specifically
to make
ask
it-
him, what can we do for the department?
No, I'll say I don't think we did,
I think that needs to be done.
you know, yeah.
But I do think,
Yeah.
if you addressed him with a question like that, I think he would be truthful.
Yeah.
And say what he thought about it, why it was in your favor or against you. I have kind of discerned that he doesn't just say what he thinks you want to hear.
Right.
If it comes up, he seems to be a man who will tell you his true opinion. And that's something to really be considered when you talk to a person.
And Pat, I'll just say this, I guess I kind of personally struggle with the term oversight, maybe because it's just been used as a club lately in so many, you know, discussions politically about but engagement and involvement, you know, right? I guess I don't want a bunch of citizens who just go, we're gonna tell you how to run this police department.
No.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that's what you're saying.
No.
But I just say, I guess I bristle at the word oversight because of how it gets used in some political arenas today to go. But I think the idea of being far more engaged in seeing things and seeing trends and stuff like that. The other thought that I had is, you know, it's always interesting, Chief, when he first came in, shared like several policies that were being redrafted and reworked. And, you know, one of them had to do with how many forms of non-lethal. You know, it's like, you know, cop no longer is just a gun, right? It's got other options, and when are those options employed? And I thought it was very interesting, just some of his discussions. And the more we hear about his policies, and I think they're about ready, Brian, or you may, about ready to put them out publicly, you know, release all the policies where people can go on and look and see what Madison City Police policy is. And that's a huge bit of transparency and open door right there that hopefully people will take advantage of. It's interesting to me how many people think they know what the police department's job is. When you go look at their policies, it's quite different than what you perceive it to be from our TV mentality of police. So, anyone else?
Do you know, so I know one time we met with the Huntsville's committee.
Yeah.
Do they have problems with attendance?
You know,
What they've done,
that was probably like in our third or fourth month,
Yeah.
and they were just getting over that big brouhaha. And a matter of fact, at the time, they were trying to restructure their committee where they wanted to basically give them more direct input to the police department stuff, which was really kind of a struggle. When I read what they were doing, I guess I'll just say my concern about the way they were heading is they were trying to shuffle. I'm going to say this, and it's probably not the right way to say it, but I'll just say it. It's my feeling that it was almost like you had city council who was trying to say, this police department stuff is a hot topic. Frank, I'm going to give this to you, and they'll come to you instead of me, and so people will still like me being the nice city council guy. And there seemed to be a little bit of that. And my concern about that was accountability belongs with the people who are elected. We're not elected, we're appointed. At the end of the day, our city council is responsible for how our police department performs. We got a problem, don't come complain. I mean, tell me what the problem is, but the real way to fix that is go to city council. And I mean, I don't have any heartburn if somebody comes and complains and telling Teddy and other city councilmen, this is what we're hearing, But at the end of the day, the accountability and responsibility is at city council. So, I mean, that, you know, that was my concern when I saw what I thought Huntsville might be shifting towards. Is like, this looks like, hey, nobody likes the police department right now. Let's just put that over there and I can still be the happy city council. You know, I'm like,
Huntsville updated the policy for their committee a few months ago.
Did they?
And I sent copies to all you guys.
That's the latest copy that you sent.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think they went as far as some of the discussion had them going, so that was good. I think they kept it. There were a lot of, when I first started wondering what a committee was, you went, some of them, they went whole hog. I mean, full oversight, and those committees failed miserably. I mean, it was just, as a rule, they almost failed miserably just because you had people that didn't have the experience. I mean, you know, it's tough. I mean, we're lucky. Rebecca was a former cop, you know, so we do have some people, you know, Kurt, when he was on, had been a reserve officer. So we had people with some, I'm gonna say some inside scoop on police department stuff, but for some of us, it was kind of a new area, so. All right, I will definitely capture that up and give it to Mark, and then we'll get with Chief and everything. And we need to talk more about it, Pat, probably in the upcoming meetings as well. So the other topic that he had under new business, if there's no other old business, was possible topics for 2024. And I know Mark, Mark had asked for people to send in topics. I think he has a working sheet of those topics. But if anybody thinks of anything else that would make a good topic.
Yep, 911 center.
You know, there was, I'll say, Pat, there was a little bit of discussion about that. I know that they have done tours. They're very selective on doing tours because it's a working, functioning thing. So we can't offer like a public tour or something, but, you know, question about whether or not we might, as a committee, be able to go do a tour and bring back some information.
Well, I know the current director fairly well, and I've been to 2 presentations that he's given to different groups, and he has a really good dog and pony show showing what the department does, the advances in technology that have affected how they operate, and things that the average person just doesn't know about. You know, even as simple as somebody calls in with a cell phone, they've got the technology now to be pretty accurately determine exactly where that cell phone is. They have programs pertaining to foreign language calls. They've got a lot of really advanced programs that the public should know about. And I've been to 2 of his presentations, and it's really good.
And that could be a presentation offered here.
Yes.
Okay. I guess I always think of it like going to the call center, but you
Yeah.
maybe think differently. Yeah, I mean, that would be excellent, because for many of us, that's our first line, you know. Well, the 2 things I'll say is, one is the 911 call center, and then to a lesser degree, there's a non-emergency number for Madison. You know, I've actually called that number a couple of times, you know, one time because a dog that got picked up and stuff like that. But, you know, there's a lot of times that you can get a lot of help by calling the non-emergency number. You know, if they've got time, they'll definitely help. But, you know, in that case, it was right after animal control had left for the day, but they said, you know, and I thought, well, maybe I have to hang on to this dog all night. And they were like, oh no, we'll send an officer. And then, you know, they showed up, picked the dog up, and they said, you know, we take it back and lock it in the building and stuff. And, you know, it's settled for the evening, and then the animal control will come in tomorrow and start doing everything.
It's automated too, so you got like a checklist or check number who you want to talk to, what division, stuff like that. So we just started that.
Cool.
Last probably 6-8 months.
That was interesting. It's like, you know, you never think about calling the non-emergency number, but I'm like, oh, I'm not going to call 911 about the dog. It's not an emergency. So, any other topics? And feel free, if you think of something later, to email it. I mean, I know we've done, like I say, Chief definitely wants to do the mental health. That is a topic, and I'll say in doing my ride around and ride along, and then in attending a couple of roll calls, I was amazed at how much that topic is talked about. It is not a small topic at all.
I was going to mention, I don't know if y'all ever had a discussion about like our drug court or the purpose of our drug court, how we process applicants for our drug court, people who basically are first-time offenders, put them through a process where basically they may have to go to a court referral officer or may have to have some sort of treatment. But basically it's set up so that if we have somebody who has a first-time problem who comes to our court system, then we work with them in order to basically expunge that first. And it helps unclog our court system. It also helps getting the right types of help to people. But it's something that we do interacting with police, basically to try to work on the problem as opposed to just simply first time in, here's your sentence, etc. It's you can be a little cynical about whether or not it's really helpful or not, but I just mentioned it as a possibility, and something y'all wanted to.
So,
because my prosecutor would be happy to come talk to you about it.
So Brian, when you throw that one out, let me ask you this: there's another one that I know some communities do. I don't know if we're big enough or but I've heard of things like a vet court.
Yeah.
For veterans and stuff. Not for
We started what we call it a drug court, but we also do for certain theft charges as well. And we've basically we wanted to implement something pretty simple, and then we wanted to see if there was a need to expand it to vet, mental health, etc. Because obviously if somebody's barefoot, has mental health issues or whatever, and the risk for disorderly conduct, etc. We want to do what we can to not just simply, all right, here's your 60-day sentence. We want to work and try to put them in the right direction as far as the treatment that they need. So we do selectively do that with our court, but it's something that I don't know that we necessarily have the numbers for a vet court, but whenever we see something that truly we think justice, or it would just be equity would require that we help somebody out in that situation, we do.
Is it fair to call those alternative justice things? Is that, just thinking of something, I wrote down drug court, then kind of like alternative justice approaches or something. And when you say you're talking Tim, bring in Tim to it.
Falls.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So we
Tim's
just
been
implemented
on
that about a year ago, so we've have a year under our belt, so we can
Okay.
really talk numbers, how we've been able to low, and again, we're not trying to just push people through the court system, but it's better evaluation, put people through some hoops to basically come back and satisfy a court that, look, I've done this, I've drug tested for a year, etc. Now, instead of, having my first charge at the age of, we also have youthful offender, but if you're a young person, 20, 22, maybe you don't have youthful offender, it can, that first offense, even if it's a misdemeanor, can hang around your necks. DUIs. And I'll tell you one, we had a nurse who was involved with, she was at the emergency room and saw a young man basically, pass away. She was very new as a nurse or whatever, and she went to a bar. And she drove home and she was over the limit. And the consequences would be that she would lose her nursing license, et cetera, or whatever. And we were satisfied that she didn't have enough of a history. We put her through basically our alternative, and she came out the other end, basically, flying colors and everything we asked her to. The alternative would have been, well, no, you're technically, this was a DUI, but there's just some situations where we, case by case, that you have to look at to see what can we do to make this right, as opposed to how do we just hang convictions on people that could, have, obviously people need to be punished. That's why we have these things on the books. But you just have to look at it case by case in order to determine how can we make things right. How can we use this as a, an opportunity to help set them, on a different course. So that's what we're working on after the last year. So if that's something y'all are interested in, I'd be happy to.
I'll definitely pass that to Mark. I think being aware of programs like that would be excellent.
I've got a question. I missed the first part. I was reading something in the notes here. But, I know at one time Huntsville had like a mental court.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have a mental health court, but I will tell you that whenever someone that clearly has a mental health issue comes in, we want to make sure that they're, we do things where we can say, okay, if you'll agree to put yourself on your medications, check back in with the judge once every couple of months, using that to basically, you come back to us and say, okay, you satisfied us that you're helping yourself. Therefore, we, the prosecutor or the city of Madison, will dismiss the charge of this disorderly conduct, things like that, where we see that there's a need to basically use that as a little bit of a leverage to get them to be more compliant with their
But you're
medication.
basically right now talking about an adult.
But we don't. But we don't necessarily have in place set aside a mental health court, because we just don't have the numbers to say that we have a mental health docket. But we absolutely. Our judge is great. Both of our judges, we have a third judge that also comes around. They're very sensitive in wanting to help people with those types of situations.
I understand what you're saying. I guess
Phyllis, are you picking on what about youthful?
exactly, because I know this from just personal working on a college campus and working with high school. There's a lot of times we have misdemeanors by kids, technically in my head, that is because they're not taking their meds. And see, the problem with that is you're dealing with an adult, but sometimes there are kids, and once they start, and it's just like adults, once they start feeling well, they don't take the medication, and then they go to the extreme. And
right.
so that's when the parent, of course, needs to be there, but you need to have a structure there to help them not continue that, because then it becomes a lifelong problem. And so, is there something?
They would be under the jurisdiction of the juvenile court if they're under the age of 18. So any sort of, if they, basically it's not called a charge, what's the alternative? They call it an adjudication. I can't remember
Yeah,
that word.
it's not considered a charge.
Because everything is basically,
It's adjudicated type stuff. So.
but it's a charge, and there's progressive types of punishment as a juvenile, but from the city standpoint, we would never see anybody under the age of 18 in our court, because that would all be handled by the juvenile county court. Once they get 18, they have a right to youthful offender, which is a thing that's very beneficial for. But if you burn your youthful offender status on a DUI and then you go out and get your second DUI, then it's youthful offender is very helpful to that kid who's from 18 to 21. Makes that first time mistake and keeping it off their record, but they still can be punished. They can still have a sentence. They can still have fines, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not it's sealed, and it's not for public consumption. As far as if they have to apply for an application, they don't have to list it, things like that. But no, absolutely. I mean, as far as children, when I say children, teenagers under the age of 18, we would just simply never see them because they're under a different system. Usually, I've seen a lot of people under the age of 18 that had a very extensive record as a juvenile, but none of that is on the permanent record once they turn 18, and it's sealed, and very few people can actually see that. So it's a completely different system.
So Phyllis, I guess carrying that, is that something that potentially we could get somebody from that area to come in and talk, or do
Sure.
something like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you would reach out to, say, the DA's office of Madison County, they probably have a couple of prosecutors that do nothing but juvenile adjudications, and they would. And again, I did it for Morgan County 20 years ago, so I'm very rusty.
Would that come under the Children's Advocacy Center?
It was very much around that time. Yeah.
I'll talk to Susan and figure out who's over there.
So, no.
I'm sorry. Neves Davis is the actual juvenile court.
Who is?
Neves Davis is
Okay.
It's the juvenile detention center. The NCAC is where child sex crimes and stuff like that.
And that's what I was trying to figure out, how far they went.
Yeah, they're totally different.
across. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, if you reach out to the DA's office, I'm sure that they're
Yeah.
love to send someone out to talk about that. Because I guess, from the public standpoint, if they see a 17-year-old, break into their car, et cetera, people, well, what's going to happen to this kid
Yeah.
now? And they may feel guilty, like, I called this kid in, but now I get it. He was still, chained down in my car. I didn't want to ruin his life. It's a completely different system. It's hard to explain, I guess. But someone who does it day in and day out could probably do a good presentation.
Okay.
Another possible presentation, although it's not specifically Madison, is Hemsey.
Hemsey?
They are a phenomenal organization. They're there when you need them.
But
And
technically, they are being bought out by Huntsville.
Right.
So they won't really be an organization for
Right.
more than a couple more weeks. I
Yeah.
think they're working to be acquired and be absorbed by Huntsville.
It changes at the first of the year,
Yeah, I
doesn't it?
think that's what this is.
I thought that's what Tracy told us.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. I had, before my wife passed, she had a lot of medical problems, and we wound up using Hemsey, a couple times a year, and they were always there along with PD, and they're great. And any opportunity that we might have to publicize the fact that this is one hell of an organization, I think is worthwhile.
And that's transitioning to
Huntsville Hospital.
Mhm.
I mean, it's basically Huntsville Hospital will become the new MC because
Yeah.
That's
with
right.
their whole network of ambulances over
And emergency
Alabama.
will come under them.
Okay.
So they're absorbing it along with, they have so many hospitals and they basically acquired so many ambulances. They're like, we might as well just go.
We might as well just do this too.
They said how they.
We got all the vehicles.
Mhm.
All right. Any final thoughts, anybody else? No? I'll definitely pass these on to Mark, and then like I said, if you think of something later at any time, hey, don't wait for the meeting, email it, that way we get it on an agenda and talk about it that way, figure out who can do that. But yeah, I can definitely, I'll talk to Susan, who's my wife, who works in the DA's office, so I'll talk to her about getting with Rob and figuring out who would be someone that would present. That'd be good.
If I know anything about lawyers, they love to come and talk and hear myself.
Especially the ones that want to be politicians.
Exactly.
Well, I go home and tell my wife, because a lot of the questions that she's been talking to me about, we're talking about them tonight.
Okay. That is all that was on the agenda. Is there any other new business that anyone would like to bring up?
Are we having a meeting in December?
I do not believe we are planning a meeting for December from what I remember.
That was,
Because that would be right at Christmas, getting anybody in here would be. I do think we're talking about January.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I think, I'll shoot Mark an email and Rebecca, and then we'll close on no meeting in December really quick. But from what I remember, we were not planning to meet in December.
I will say this, in court, we always had an unofficial holiday for the championship game because we just assumed that Alabama would be in it every year. But so we always had to consider, setting to see if it was going to be the night of the championship game, but I'm afraid that may not be.
We do the 4th Tuesday?
23rd.
I got the 26th.
what?
December would be our next. Oh, never mind. You guys have moved on to January, as you should have. Yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry.
Our meeting comes on my birthday.
Does it?
23rd,
You'll be 18?
the 18th.
Sounds great. Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved to adjourn.
Second.
Frank and Pat again. Any discussion? And let's move for a vote. All in favor, you can leave. Anybody not? Stay around and talk to yourself, right? We didn't give you a chance if you wanted to say anything. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good.
You're good?
I'm good.
Thank you, sir.